Sorry. I record. Awesome. Cool. So like I said, when you visit a URL, the response you normally get in the browsers is HTML, which is a combination of data and presentation. Most applications present their data in this visual way so that it's easy for the end user to view that particular data, and using CSS to make it look pretty and all that good stuff. But some applications take it a bit further, and they provide the data with respect to their application for other applications to use. They do this via an API, which is a series of what we call endpoints, which they're really just URLs, but we normally call them endpoints when it comes to an API that provide specific data. The builder of that application can use this API and call these API endpoints, and they can decide how they want to present their data, different than how, say, GitHub would present their data. So we're going to be working with the GitHub API. GitHub API, let's just Google that real quick. It'll take us to the API docs. This is the docs for the Google API, and their entire API is accessed through HTTPS and then api.github.com. So anytime they reference a particular URL in their API docs, know that you're always going to prepend that with api.github.com. So for example, if you go to users, to get a single user, you'd have to visit api.github.com/users/ a particular username. So this is the API that we're going to be working with in this exercise, running a number of different things using CodePen. So, but before we go into that, I want to talk about how most modern web APIs present their data. So let's take that. If you want to go to your browsers, api.github.com/users/ and then whatever your username is. You'll see that the response is in the form of JavaScript object notation, or JSON, or JSON, however you pronounce it. I pronounce it JSON. So this is the payload that you get from hitting this particular API endpoint. And what we're going to be doing is making AJAX requests to obtain this data from this API endpoint. And AJAX is short for asynchronous JavaScript and XML. I know that this response isn't in the form of XML, but back in the day, that's what it used to be. That's why it's called AJAX. When most modern web APIs changed their response to JSON, it didn't sound good to change the name to AJAX, so they kept it AJAX. But that's essentially what's happening is, whenever you make AJAX calls, what you're getting back is actually JSON and not XML. So again, this is the API that we're going to be working with. So to start, let's everyone open up a CodePen. So if you go to codepen.io, you should be able to start without creating a new account. So you're going to go to create new pen, and that'll open up this browser where we've got 3 windows: HTML, CSS, and JavaScript. And let's just quickly stub out a body, an H1, maybe with an ID of username. H1, cool. And then for now, let's say let's create a div with a class of followers. And let's just make that an empty div for now. Whoops. Cool. Awesome. So we've got an H1 of username. We've got an empty div with a class of followers. And again, that username is an ID of username. Cool. So yeah, going back to the GitHub API, what we're going to want to do is make an AJAX request to this particular API endpoint. And again, you can substitute this the username with your particular username. But if you want to use mine to make it identical, no problem. So we're going to be using jQuery to make our AJAX request. And we can use fetch, but for now, let's just use jQuery because fetch is a little more modern. So if you click on the little settings icon next to JS, we can pull in different libraries. So go to this quick add, and we're going to choose jQuery. And then it automatically adds that using the jQuery CDN. You can save and close. So what we can do to make an AJAX request, let's search the docs. AJAX jQuery. Should be the first one. Here's the jQuery API documentation. Here are some examples of how to make an AJAX request using jQuery. So you're going to call jQuery.ajax. First argument's going to be the URL that you're going to make an AJAX request to, and then you can add a number of different settings. So let's quickly start stubbing that out. So in our JS window, for now I'm going to close or minimize the CSS window because who cares about CSS, right? Here, we're going to utilize the jQuery object, call the AJAX method. Uh-oh, somebody is going to make a comment. Oh, amen, yeah. Yeah, for me, I'm just not a fan of CSS. I think Chris is on, and I think she's CSS fanatic. Cool. So the AJAX method takes in an object. So we're going to just start passing that object in for now, make it an empty object. But that's the argument we're going to pass in to this particular request. The first key is going to be the URL for that object. And again, we're going to be using the GitHub API. So I'm going to copy this endpoint. Cool. And then if we go back to the documentation, URL is one of them. Let's take a look at some other things we can pass in. Don't need to worry about context. We scroll down here. Method, yep. You know what? I think it might be type. So if we, here it is, type. It's an alias for method. Let's see. I like to use type, but yeah, we could also do method. Let's do that. Method is going to be a GET request. I think that's good enough. And another key that you can pass to this AJAX request object is what's called a success, which is a function that takes in the actual data. I'm going to, for now, console.log that data. And here you can see there's a little button here for the console. So we can actually see this console.log run. Awesome. Let me just increase that a little bit. So we can see here, this is the response that we get from making this console.log call. So we can see that it's working. We're making an AJAX request to this API endpoint. It's a GET request. And upon success of this API call, this function is going to run. And we'll see that the data that gets passed in to this callback function gets logged to the console. And we can see in our console that data being logged. And it's identical to what we get when we visit that API endpoint. Is anyone else getting something different?
Well, no, sorry, I don't mean to interrupt. How did you actually run the code?
It automatically does.
It automatically runs. You can change the settings if you want to actually run it yourself. Right here, autosave and auto
Behavior, autosave. Huh.
If you save and close, then you have to actually click this run button to get it to run.
Oh, I don't have it. Yeah.
Probably. In your settings behavior.
It could be just too, like right now, I just realized that there was a separate area for console, and I didn't open that up yet, but it's in there. It's in the bottom.
Yeah, I have it open. Yeah, I don't have that run button next to save. I don't know. If anything, I'll just follow along.
And that's after unchecking the this autosave and this auto updating preview.
I'm stupid.
No, you're not.
Thank you.
Cool. Awesome. So everyone's seeing their data logged to the console. That looks good. Also, instead of passing in the success callback as a property of the object to the AJAX call, what we can do is tack on a .done method. I like indenting it a little bit. So you would tack on a .done that takes in an anonymous function as well. And you can do it that way if you want. In console.log the data. Either way works. I kind of like this syntax better because it'll help you when it comes time to learning about promises and how to deal with promises. And it makes it look a little more synchronous. You know, we're going to run this code, and once it's done, we're going to run this code here. So I'm going to stick with this syntax for now. Is anyone else seeing something different when you update? Nope. Cool. Awesome. So now what I want to do is I want to take this data that gets returned from my API call, and I want to update this field. Oh, somebody okay? Is everyone good? Something kind of strange. Cool. So I want to update this username field with the actual username that gets returned in the data. So if we take a look at my console, what field from this data object has the particular username that I want?
Login, right?
Well, yeah.
Exactly. Cool. So let's just test that out. I'm going to update this log to data.login. And if we run the code, we'll see that here. Cernan B gets logged to the console. Awesome. I'm going to clear my console real quick. Cool. So then how can we take this data.login and add it to the DOM using jQuery?
Document.write.
Document.write works, but in jQuery, we also have this a couple of methods at our disposal. jQuery add to DOM. Looks like we can use this append method. We can see an example of it being used here, where they're selecting a particular class element of inner and calling the .append and then appending it with whatever they want to append to it. So it looks like we can use something very similar to that. So I'm just going to copy and paste that bit of code here. And we just need to update this to, instead of selecting the class of inner, we're going to select the ID of username. And instead of appending this p tag of test, we're going to append data.login. Looks good. Let's run it. Cool. We can see that we've appended the DOM. Is anyone getting anything different? We need to troubleshoot. Cool. Looks good. So now let's think about, not using an anonymous function and calling a named function. So let's say that I want that function to be called maybe user success. User success. And it also takes in the data. And we want this bit of code to run inside that function. What we can do inside our .done callback is just call the function. That way we can actually use a named function so that we can reuse this function anywhere else that we want, and it's not just running upon .done. So if we run that, we should be good. And it still works as is. Does anyone have any questions on what I did there? And why I created a named function and called that inside my done. Again, it's for reusability in case we want to call user success anywhere else besides just this AJAX call. Cool. So now let's think about what we want to do next. We have this div with a class of followers, and ideally, I'd like to view this user's followers. And if we think about the GitHub API, let's see if we can navigate the GitHub API. Here we have this link under users called followers. And we see right there, we can make a GET request to user/username/followers. That looks good. Awesome. You know what? Let's use the Fetch API for this particular example. So when using the Fetch API, again, it's a more modern way of making API calls, and it uses the promise spec. So the way that works, and actually let's Google that, Fetch API. There's no good examples here. Using Fetch. There we go. So you call Fetch, you pass in the URL, any URL, and then upon success of this Fetch request, we tack on what's called a .then. So let's first just do the Fetch request. So in our CodePen, let's call Fetch, and I'm going to grab this bit. And we want to tack on followers at the end of that. /followers. And I'm just going to console.log what this returns. So I'm just console.logging my fetch request here. Let's run the code. And we see we get back a promise. It doesn't tell us much, but we know that we get back a promise. Actually, if we open up the actual console, it might give us a little more. There we go. Excellent. So here's that actual promise object that gets returned, and it has a status of resolved, which means that it worked. So anytime a promise resolves, we can tack on a .then to that promise. And that .then takes in a callback function with our response as an argument. Let's console.log that response. So .then function, console.log response. Let's run the code. We can see right here, here's that response. And it's got a number of different things related to the response. Status 200, status text okay, headers, stuff that, for us, we don't really care about. So we need to take this response and convert this response to actual JSON that we want, in readable format. So what we're going to do is return res.json. We're going to call the .json method on the response, and it'll convert our response to actual data that we can use and consume. So we're going to tack on another dot then that takes in another function with our data. And here, we do console.log data. And again, the way fetch works is it allows us to use promises, which makes our code a lot more readable and synchronous. Because this all makes sense. So we're going to fetch this API endpoint, then we're going to take the response from that fetch call and convert that to JSON. Then we're going to log that data that we get back to the console. I'm going to clear my console. I'm going to run. Now here, we get back an array of objects, which should be all of my followers. So right now I have 13 followers in GitHub, and you can see it's just an array of objects of a number of different GitHub users as my followers. Awesome. Cool. So now we can take this payload and start to consume that data and append the DOM so we can see my followers just under my username. Any questions?
My only question was at the top in line 1, actually, when you did $Ajax. Is there a reason you did that as opposed to $.get?
Nope, no difference. You can use .get. Then by utilizing that, we don't need any of these other methods, and we actually don't even need to pass in an object to that call. Oops.
You got comma.
There we go.
Okay.
It all still works. Yep. Yep, good question. Cool. So now this data is, again, an array of my followers. And again, I could have updated this to have named functions for our callback. So something like function parse JSON that takes in a response and that returns res.json. And then here I would call parse JSON. And then maybe here I'll create a function called followers success that takes in the data. And that we're just going to keep to what we're doing right now, just console.log the data. And then here I would call followers success. So if we run it, it should still look the same. Console, yep, still have my array of 14 followers. Cool. Awesome. Cool. So now let's take this data of followers and add these followers to the DOM. So one thing we're going to need to do is iterate over these followers. So what method can I call to iterate over my followers? And let's update this data to maybe call it followers array so we can be a little more semantic. Yeah, so what can I do to iterate over this array of followers?
Maybe for each.
Mm-hmm. So for each, and that takes in a function where we pass in an individual follower. Awesome. So now we're inside this iterator. And now we want to take this div of followers and maybe add each follower to this particular div. So we can utilize the same logic that we used up here where we append that particular follower. And for now, let's say I just want to, append their username. So I would assume it's going to be the same method or same data structure, where it's .login. So for now, I'm going to grab this div of class followers using jQuery. .followers, and I want to append follower login. Looks good. I'm going to close my console here. Let's run the code. Cool. Just to make it a little cleaner, because again, this is just all the followers without any spacing, any markup. So I'm just going to actually, let's use ES6 template strings. So this is the backtick key. And we're going to do a p tag. And then we're going to use a $ and curly braces to interpolate this expression. Now each follower should be in a p tag inside this div of class followers. Let's run the code. Awesome. Cool. Is anyone getting anything different?
I can't get the followers to show up. Sorry, I don't mean to hold everyone up.
No. That's
You're not, because mine aren't either.
Yeah. Are we using my username?
I'm using your username. I might have gotten a little lost because you wrote a couple of functions pretty quickly, and I was just trying to catch up. But
Gotcha. Okay, so one of them was the parse JSON here.
oh, wait, I see something now. Hold on, yeah. Wait, return. Can you go back up to your fetch on line 11? Or I'm assuming it's a line 11. Or no, it's not line 11. Wait, yeah, it is. Hold on. Sorry.
I want to make sure you guys are where I'm at. So take your time to get to where I'm at.
Follower success. So then you deleted all those thens. Followers. Function data using an append. Okay. Okay. I'm good.
Got it.
You good?
Yeah.
Awesome. Cool. Excellent. So now let's say that I wanted each follower to be clickable. And when I click on that follower, it'll take me to a new page a new page that shows me their GitHub profile, their actual GitHub profile. So how can I update this bit of code here, line 18 on my screen, so that each follower is clickable and it takes me to their particular GitHub page?
You would need, well, I don't know how exactly to change it, but basically you would need I don't know how it looks in the response, but you would need, I would assume something like HTML URL and use that as in an anchor tag kind of thing.
Let's take a look at each individual follower real quick. Let's do that here. Console.log follower. Oh, we still got them here. Clear that. Let's run the code. Okay, so here's one of the followers. So yeah, which one of these? You said HTML URL?
Yeah, it is that one, HTML URL.
Cool. So let's take a look at that. Awesome. So how would we use HTML URL in the context of what we're appending to the DOM so that it's a clickable link that takes me to their particular page. First off, how can we make this clickable?
I'm honestly not sure. Unless you just literally put in, you append an anchor tag, and inside that is where you do the interpolation kind of thing.
Exactly. So let's start with just the A tag. We need the href. For now, let's make the href just a hash so we can actually see it turn into an anchor. There we go. Awesome. So now, yeah, we just need to update the href to point to oh, you know what? That's right. We can't use actually, that should have worked. What is going on? We may just have to.
I just posted in the chat what that worked for me.
That's right. Yes. Thanks, Jay. He's yelling at me, but you know what? I think cool. Yep. Awesome. For no reason. Thanks, Jay. Cool. Now, if we click on, and actually, let's say that we wanted to open a new window, target equals underscore blank. And there we go. Just taking some time to load, but yeah, now they're all clickable links to where we can actually see their GitHub profiles. Awesome. I don't even know this person. Cool. Yeah, so that's, I mean, essentially how we consume GitHub API to present data the way we want to present it, rather than how GitHub currently presents it. And again, we can update this as we want. You know, ideally, I'd like to create a model object for a follower. So something like function follower. That takes in something like HTML, URL, and name, something like that. Name. And then what I would do is inside my iterator, as I'm iterating through, I would take new follower. So new follower, here we go. Var new follower equals new follower. So I'm invoking this constructor function, creating a new follower object, passing in follower.login and follower.html URL. So these two values on the individual follower are going to get passed into this new call as a name and HTML URL. Then I can do something like this dot name equals the name that gets passed in here. And this dot HTML URL equals the HTML URL that gets passed in up here. Let's see what that gives us. If we console.log new follower, after this code is run here, let's see what this console looks like. This is going to be similar to what you're going to be doing when it comes to working on your Rails/jQuery projects, when you guys eventually get there. Awesome. So now we have 14 new instances of follower, all each with an HTML URL property and a name property. So individual instances. Now, what we can do is add a method to the follower prototype. And then, again, this is just getting to advanced JavaScript, but never too early to start. Dot append follower to DOM equals a function. So follower.prototype.append follower to DOM is equal to a function. And what we're going to do is grab the div with class followers, call the append button, or the append method, and do what we did before, where we just p a href. And here, instead of follower.html, we're going to call this .html URL. And then again, interpolate this dot name. That's the value that we set here. I think that looks good. Awesome. So now after we create a new follower, we can call that method. So new follower dot append follower to DOM. Let me get rid of this here. Cool. So again, we have this follower.prototype.append follower to DOM method, which we call, or which we create on the prototype for follower. So you can kind of think of this as kind of like an instance method that we call on instances of follower. So that's why we're up here, we say var new follower equals a new follower, pass in the appropriate attributes, and that's why we can call append follower to DOM on line 19, because this is kind of like an instance method on any instances of follower. So if you kind of compare it to, Ruby, it's not exactly what's going on, but sometimes using that analogy of pretending that it's an instance method helps out those that aren't as familiar with JavaScript. And again, the reason we want to do this, use this method on the prototype, is because we don't want to allocate additional space for each instance of follower, because we could have done this dot append follower to DOM equals function and do all this stuff in here. But for every instance of follower, we're going to allocate space for this method that's going to work for every instance of follower no matter what. So why take up additional space for a method that's going to do the same thing no matter what instance of follower is calling it. But the only difference is the this.html URL, which we can access because we're calling it on this instance of follower here. So this new follower is changing every time we iterate using for each, so that the this reference is going to be different depending on what instance is calling it. So again, save resources, adding methods to the prototype allows us to save disk space when it comes to, again, taking up additional resources. So let's see if that worked. Make sure I didn't break anything. Awesome. Now we can still click on, forgot to do target equals blank, so it's just going to open a new window. It's actually going to open it inside here. So I'm going to update that to target equals underscore blank. There we go. Cool. Awesome. Cool. All right, guys. That's essentially what I wanted to cover for this session. Wasn't going to be too involved. It's just an introduction to utilizing APIs, calling API endpoints, and then using the data we get from that to consume and append the DOM. So any questions?
Is there any way to share what you did? Because I had everything. I signed up for a CodePen account, and then it deleted everything.
Hang on. Let me see. I think there is. I don't know if this will still, the code will still be there. 1 second. I'm going to post my link to the chat here and let me know if that's the case. You know what? I think there was a string.
Yep, yeah, it's there. I can copy and
There?
paste.
Okay, cool.
Thanks.
Awesome. Cool. All right, guys. Well, that's it. I will let you all go. CernanB is my Slack handle, so if you need me, that's where I'm at. And I will see you all either on the Slack channel or via video. That's it. You guys are free to go. Have a good night. Take care.
Thanks. Bye.